Thank you, Maria. Yes, exactly. The idea for me is to talk a bit more about the cultural heritage and its relation to tourism. So going a bit beyond the landscapes. So what I will do, I'll just give you a summary of what we did in the ESPON Heritage project, and then how we arrived to a follow-up. Let's say we call it a spin-off project on Iceland, and then my colleague Solon will talk a bit about the spin-off a bit later. Clara, so the next slide, please. So if you look at the portfolio of cultural heritage activities right now, so we have basically two projects. One is targeted analysis project, which is ESPON Heritage. I know this is a kind of our internal jargon, but by targeted analysis we mean projects focused on specific amount of countries or regions. So in this case, we had 11 countries, and basically the project covered the economic impact of material cultural heritage. And this project is already finalized in 2019. So this is going to be the focus of my presentation. And then as something, as an addition to what we have done on the material cultural heritage, we also have a running applied research project, which is a pan-European project focusing on the impact of cultural heritage on the societal well-being in the European region. So project is still ongoing. Just to give you, the status update. So Clara, next slide. Here is the geography of the ESPON Heritage project, and it covered 11 countries / regions, and Iceland was not part of the study, but at the same time, I think there was some territorial balance. But also, this is really dependent on the stakeholders, because these kind of projects are initiated by stakeholders, and it was basically led by the Norwegian Directorate of Cultural Heritage, and this is how the kind of geography formed, because the lead stakeholder managed to attract these particular stakeholders to do a project under the ESPON program. Next slide. And so, as I said, we did economic impact analysis, and if you look at let's say the theoretical framework of how you potentially can do economic valuation, then I mean there are two big methods, strands of methods, which is a non-market valuation and market valuation. So our project was dealing with market valuation and looked basically at the income, employment, and economic growth aspects in these selected 11 countries. Next slide. And so what we did during the analysis, we chose eight sectors which are being impacted by cultural heritage and material cultural heritage, and we tried to find relevant NACE codes for each sector, which would illustrate, which would kind of are related to the cultural heritage. And we looked at the three big impact indicators, which is employment, gross value added, GVA, and turnover, as kind of the scope of our impact assessment. And if the chosen sector is fully related to material cultural heritage, as in some cases it's like that, like if we take, for instance, archaeology, then we just searched for relevant statistics in the national databases and European databases like Eurostat. But in most of the times, as you can imagine, these economic sectors are much bigger. So the cultural heritage is let's say only partially related to what's happening in these sectors. So to resolve this problem was quite a challenge, but what we did, we opted for choosing some proxies to approximate the share that cultural heritage has on these impact indicators. And one of the widest used proxies was pre-1919 dwellings in total dwellings. So obviously it's not ideal situation, but in any ways, this is some kind of approximation. So then for other sectors, we chose some different proxies, which which I hope approximated the impact. The next slide. So if you look at the total impact, but just to note, in these 11 countries, then tourism is the biggest contributor, along with the construction sector. I think this doesn't come perhaps as a surprise, but I think it was good to go through this exercise to verify what we already thought before. It was also good to see, let's say, the shares of other sectors, the total economic impact. The next slide. And besides that, we also produced a working paper, which is kind of a synthesis of the ESPON Heritage Project. This was done internally by us at the ESPON EGTC. And mostly it was done with a purpose to show some European dimension and some indicators we can see at the European level. Next slide. And here I have two maps where you can see this European dimension. And in one case, we analyzed the historical building stock in Europe, just because there was a lot of interest to really understand how much cultural heritage we have. And this actually is not a trivial question. It's quite hard to answer this question because, as you know, if you look at the national databases and registers, there's quite a lot of information, but to get it in a way which is comparable across regions, across countries, it's quite difficult. So here again, we looked into this proxy of pre-1990 dwellings, which was gathered during the 2011 population housing census, and kind of voila, here's the European picture. And we can see that the high proportion of these dwellings are concentrated in France, Germany, United Kingdom, and Italy. That if we look at Iceland, we can see that Iceland perhaps doesn't have that much cultural heritage. But of course, this is quite kind of relative, because if we could look into statistics about the use of cultural heritage, if we could employ big data and these kind of things, I'm pretty sure there would be maybe some other insights on this as well. But it was a good exercise. Next slide. And here I have a map about the cultural heritage related employment at the European level. This time at the NUTS2 scale, because here again, very hard to find statistics at the territorial level, which kind of characterize cultural heritage sector, and for employment, we managed to get statistics from the Structural Business Statistics Survey, which offered the most detailed information on cultural employment. And this is also with a caveat that there are only a few, let's say not a few, but only a couple of NACE codes which are very well, where you have a lot of information at territorial level. So this is also not a complete picture, but at least some kind of picture if you look at the European level. And here, cultural employment is significant in Central and Northern Europe and regions of Northern Italy, and I'm seeing that also actually Iceland is doing quite okay in this kind of indicator. So the next slide. And now I just wanted to briefly talk about the Spinoff case study. So as you noticed, Iceland was not covered by this project. So one of the reasons why we are doing this kind of spin-off case studies in ESPON is to kind of mitigate this problem that some countries are addressed, some countries are not. But at the same time, there's some interesting insights which we could gather from this kind of studies. So what we're doing right now, we are basically with colleagues from Iceland setting up a case study, and I should say this has not yet started in terms of implementation. This is more like a scoping stage. But the idea is more or less that these kind of spin-offs are designed to serve a certain policy process or a certain discussion in the member state, and not really look at a kind of a wider scope, right? Like there's no pan-European, let's say, analysis. This is really about the case studies and about the member states. It should extrapolate and apply findings from the source projects, meaning in this case the ESPON Heritage Project, but of course where it is relevant. And ideally, but also if possible, apply methodologies from the source projects, which is the ESPON Heritage Project. I'm really happy that Iceland really signed up for this, because I think there are some very interesting things which could be done in this project. And particularly when we consider that Iceland has cultural heritage and it has economic value and it can attract tourists. But as far as I understand, this has not been discussed that much so far. The focus is more on natural heritage, which is kind of obvious knowing Iceland. But I think this will be an interesting opportunity to go a bit beyond and talk about the economic value of cultural heritage in Iceland and what it can bring to the table, especially also considering tourism. So I'll just stop here, and my colleague Solrun will take from here and explain the plans for the Icelandic case study. Thanks a lot.